on Follow
Data's
Steven
in.
Follows.
The numbers don't lie. We're following Steven Follows.
So if you don't know who Steven Follows is, I should actually Google him at some point. But no, go to StevenFollows.com. StevenFollows.com. He does these incredible data-backed deep dives into nuances in the film industry. And whoo, he had some doozies this week. I have 4 stories specifically that I want to talk through. One of them is that he actually went into all of the patent filings that Netflix has to look at what that may say about how Netflix views the future of the film industry. I want to go specifically to the second section of this, how it's made. So these are patents that Netflix has that talk about how films are ultimately made. Sometimes through AI and sometimes through other measures. The 3 of these really stood out to me. One of them is the AI-generated trailers and previews. Machine learning picks out the key moments from films and shows to automatically build trailers, highlighting and promotional highlights and promotional clips, cutting down on manual editing. So basically, when you're scrolling and a film doesn't necessarily have a trailer, or Netflix isn't happy with the trailer, the idea here is that it just uses AI to pull out the most important moments, show you flashes of those, and those are the things that are going to motivate you to watch that film. Interesting use of AI, doing it without... So it's a little bit misleading because AI generated trailers isn't necessarily accurate. It's trailers that were curated using AI. So they're not necessarily making anything from new, they're cutting it from scratch. Worth flagging, there are two other ones, interactive and branching stories. So Netflix creates interactive titles where user choices shape the narrative path. The system predicts choices and buffers likely segments in advance of the streaming experience. So if you watched Black Mirror Bandersnatch, is that even a fair thing? If you played Black Mirror Bandersnatch, it's been a couple of years since I feel like was that during the pandemic or was that pre-pandemic? It was the choose your own adventure Netflix / Black Mirror experience. I hated it because I kept getting cut in the same loop. I felt like no matter what I did, it always ended the same way. And it felt like it was ending early. Anyway, this is basically, they own the patent for that. We haven't seen that really come back up, but they have the capabilities and they own the patent. So there's a possibility of that resurfacing. The last one is promo artwork and thumbnails picked by algorithms. Algorithms select the most effective video frames and images to use as thumbnails or promotional artwork, taking into account face detection, color, and likely engagement. So think of this, I mean, I don't know the technology, but this is what this screams to me. Think of this as Netflix saying, we have this movie, full duration of this movie, and literally, if it's in 24 frames per second, every second of this movie represents 4 potential frames that we could show somebody as a thumbnail, and every second of the movie of footage is something that we could display to somebody as a segment of the movie. And so let's build an automated process that that first identifies the things that we believe would perform best as a thumbnail and as a preview. And then let's test those and see which ones perform best with this audience versus this audience. Hey, this guy really likes submarines, so this movie that has a 2-second clip of a submarine, we're going to show him that 2-second clip as a part of the preview. He's that much ultimately more likely to watch it. Interesting use of technology. I wanted to flag that. That was an interesting deep dive. Who would have thought going into and looking at Netflix's Netflix's patents could tell you something about where they want to go as a business. Also kind of talks about where they've been as a business. Really interesting read. Totally worth subscribing to StephenFollows.com for more on that. There are 3 other Stephen Follows stories that I really feel like I have to talk about. One of them, he dug into 160,000 questions that filmmakers asked on Reddit and what those filmmakers were asking. So effectively, what are the most common topics that people are asking questions about? There were really 2 things here that, there are a lot of things here to flag, but I will say beyond just subscribing to Stephen Follows, I definitely highly encourage you to go to engagefilmmakers.com. He built this really great guide, basically a report on the industry, and go support this guy because the work that he does is just so freaking incredible from an analysis standpoint, but just from just the insights. It's just fascinating the way, not just how he looks at these things, but what the data even say about this. So engagefilmmakers.com and StephenFollows.com. There were a couple of things that I wanted to flag. First is everyone's asking a lot about gear. And when it comes to gear, 18% about, 18-ish% about cameras and post-production gear. I don't think you would be surprised to find that gear is a very, very common topic. He found that there were a lot of posts about mental health. And he actually kind of broke this down into how frequent they were, mostly around the toxicity of industry culture. Those had the highest kind of engagement rates and number of comments on them. More about the second would be creative process, then self-reflection, and then kind of a similar culture around, or a similar level of engagement around harassment and anxiety and motivation and well-being and logistics and all of that. On the business side of things, there's the business side of the industry, but talking about set life, I think the thing that I would talk about here on the business side is talking about the legalities of this, like copyright and deal structures and paperwork. That is not. I normally recommend lawyers, not Reddit, as a source of legal advice. That threw up a little, I'm not going to say red flag, but a little yellow flag to me, not because of Steven's reporting, but if filmmakers are trusting Reddit as a source for legal advice, that's not a good start. Beyond that, they talked about, set life. They talked about, lost it there for a second. I really liked this. They talked about what separated respected film festivals from a scam. So when it comes to Reddit reactions to filmmaker questions around film festivals and distribution, results, lots of comments, and scams, really high score and a lot of comments. People are really curious about avoiding film festival scams, 1, and 2, how to make the most out of the time, money, and effort they spend on film festivals, and avoiding scams is an important part of that. This Reddit community is the right place, I think, for conversations about film festivals that are not delivering value. There are many, many, many small film festivals out there that are doing the right thing, but there are also many, many, many film festivals out there, big and small, that are not doing the right thing. And Reddit is the perfect place for flagging those things and having those conversations, because you don't necessarily get that same level of support, with all due respect, from Film Freeway, where you are typically submitting to these film festivals. They are a home to a lot of predatory film festivals. Okay, the next one is I wanted to say it was clickbait, but this was fascinating. Was Harvey Weinstein thanked more often than God at the Oscars? So I talked about this at the top of the show. This was a story that was circulating at the peak of the origins of the Me Too movement, that Harvey Weinstein had been thanked more than God at the Oscars. Now, is that true? Stephen went in and actually tried to get down to the bottom of this for you, mapping it out. And so there are a couple of things I want to show here. The first one is, well, there's a lot from, how many words are in Oscar speeches, words by award, what people are talking about, activism versus personal journey versus industry commentary. But the meat and potatoes, the one I want to get down to, number one, is the role of religious references in Oscar thanks speeches. Look at this. It wasn't high. It started very low. It wasn't until really the 1960s that Oscar speeches started to rise. Mentions of God and religion in Oscar speeches started to rise. It largely peaked around 25% of acceptance speeches in the 2000s and has been a little bit lower since then. But those themes largely did not exist 50, 60, 70 years ago and are much more prevalent today than they were then. That was fascinating to me. I didn't expect that. I would have thought that generally they have been on the decline. Nope. Last 2 decades. But now, let's talk about Harvey Weinstein versus God. So, was Harvey Weinstein thanked more than God in Oscar speeches? No, he wasn't. Now, it was pretty close in the 1990s. He was mentioned in just over 5% of speeches, but religion was mentioned in just over 6%. That was as close as he got in the 2000s and 2010s. The Harvey Weinstein thanking went down. But this is item number 3. This is mind-blowing. Is there somebody in Hollywood who was thanked more than God in Oscar acceptance speeches? I'll give you 1 second to think about it. Did you come up with somebody? Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg in the 1980s and 1990s received more thanks in Oscar speeches than God or religion. So I love this story, one, because giving credit where credit is due, Steven Spielberg giving back in the community, but also taking credit where credit is not due. Harvey Weinstein, not a good person, was not thanked more than God. Thank God? And, woo, I can't believe we did it. Oh, wait, no, we got one more. I forgot. Okay. Woo, okay. This is one I'm going to, again, I can't thank Steven enough for the stories that he writes. They're so freaking incredible. This one, I'm just I'll hand this off to you. You can go read this yourself. StephenFollows.com. The headline here is that he basically talked to 300 plus film market professionals and asked them what are the most common reasons that they decline films for distribution. He has a really great list of 18 takeaways from recognizable talent to trust in the film industry, all the way down to overlooking the power of universal storytelling. Go read this story. It is 100% worth your time. Shout out to Stephen Follows. He doesn't know that we do this segment, but I do, and I'm grateful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up the Garvescope show for what is today, May 2nd,